Hello and welcome to Politics London. Coming up, what can be done to address the issue of air pollution in the capital?
You know, sometimes someone can say, we're putting in a scheme and we will review it in 18 months. Well, in 18 months, you could have a child who didn't have asthma, and by the end of the 18 months, if things haven't got any better, that child could have asthma.
Good morning. Great to have you with us for the programme. Hi, I'm Samantha Simmons. Joining me for the duration of the show are Steve Reid, Labour MP for Croydon North, who is Shadow Justice Minister, and Andrew Boff, Conservative Chairman of the London Assembly. A very warm welcome to you both. And as ever, if you'd like to join in the conversation at home, do follow us at BBC London News. Now, as we start here on Friday, I want to start with reflections on the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Steve, to you first.
Well, I mean, it's shocking to see in the 2020s something that feels like it should be coming out of the 1930s, where you've got a European power invading aggressively a neighbour without provocation. And this is a threat, not just to Ukraine, which is apparent, but actually it's an assault on democracy and the values that we all hold dear. And it's quite right that the West is standing together to threaten Putin with sanctions that will cripple his economy if he doesn't reverse what he's up to.
Andrew.
Well, yesterday, I asked the London Assembly to agree to us sending a letter to the Mayor of Kyiv to say that we're standing with him, and also to stand with those 70,000 possibly Ukrainian Londoners who have made homes here. This is an appalling situation. Steve is quite right to say this has echoes of the 1930s. The sanctions that have been proposed by the government are unprecedented and will hurt the Russian economy. But some of those sanctions have to be internationally driven, and we have to get the complete agreement of the European Union and the United States to things like ending SWIFT transactions from Russian oligarchs. But, you know, I've been to Kyiv and I have friends in Kharkiv and in Lviv, and I just can't imagine the fear they must have at the moment as Russian tanks are entering their homes. This is a long-term game. Yeah.
Andrew, you mentioned the many tens of thousands of Ukrainians living here in the capital. Well, as the Russian-Ukrainian crisis unfolded, our reporter Helen Drew went out to meet some of London's Ukrainian community to hear their fears and apprehensions.
When she doesn't answer, do you get worried?
Yes. Yeah. All the time.
Lana owns a Ukrainian restaurant in Forest Gate. She's trying to reach her mum in western Ukraine.
But she don't answer.
She doesn't pick up and Lana's nerves are clear.
I don't know what to say. Because it's like she's alone and there, and it's not like always in situation like that. People have to come together to help each other. We have to be strong.
Eventually.
Мам, привіт, чого ти не відповідала? Я вже переживала, що таке сталося.
Her mum answers and is okay. Lana tells me her mum's back garden has a bomb shelter.
When in Second World War, this shelter was in a government, like registered in the government to keep this shelter for people to hide in dangerous time. So they've been talking about how they have to prepare this.
Putin, hands off Ukraine! Putin, hands off Ukraine!
Protests outside the Russian embassy in West London have intensified in the last few days.
It's not just Ukrainians who are protesting. I've met Russians here who don't want to be in
interviewed for fear of their family back home's safety, but they tell me it's important that they came and stood in solidarity with Ukraine. The Ukrainians here are anxious but staying strong.
I think the Ukrainians are strong right now, and we are ready to fight. We're ready to fight back because we know who our enemy is. We've been fighting him for 8 years, so we are ready for this, but we want peace. Peace is the goal.
Then I have family back home who have to pack or prepare for any sort of emergency.
So my brother Volodymyr was killed at the front line in 2017. He was a soldier of the Ukrainian armed forces. He served for 2 years and then he was killed by shrapnel in Luhansk.
All the Ukrainians we spoke to want to tell their stories, to be heard. So much so, we were invited to the wake of a 101-year-old who fought against Nazi and Russian forces in the Second World War.
It's been, historically proven that it's going to be a problem. And here we are, 21st century, we are having the problems that have been kind of brewing since the Holodomor, since the Second World War, and so on. Personally, I believe it's not enough, just sanctions and and blocking the personal bank accounts. Myself, I've signed up a page that we are blocking all the Russian produce being sold in around the stores in Britain. It's like vodka, anything connected to Russia should be stopped circulating around the Western world.
After Russian troops invaded in the early hours of Thursday morning, a further protest in London, this time outside number 10.
We feel anxious. I think we are betrayed because we've been talking about this for 8 years. The war started back in 2014. We just gifted Putin 8 years more.
It was Tuesday when we visited Lana. Since Russia invaded, she tells me her mum is okay and not yet ready to leave her home.
Well, Steve, what would you say to the thousands of Ukrainians here in London who have loved ones back home in Ukraine? What should the government be offering? Should they be offering them safe passage and somewhere to live here?
Well, there we heard the human side of this conflict, didn't we? People desperately worried about family and friends back home in the Ukraine. And I hope it will encourage Ukrainians here as well as in Ukraine that all the parties in Parliament were standing squarely together this week to condemn Vladimir Putin's invasion of their free, sovereign, independent country. It's very important. All parties committing to finally bring in sanctions, which frankly didn't happen in the way that it should have done after the 2008 invasion of Georgia or the 2014 invasion of Crimea. Putin, I believe, concluded that the benefits to him outweighed the costs of the sanctions. And this time we have to make sure that those costs outweigh any benefit he may perceive. So this cannot or will not ever happen again. Now, in terms of refugees, there is, of course, a possibility, a likelihood now that refugees will be coming here. And it's important that the UK government plays its part and welcomes some of those people into our country for sanctuary when they can be safe. Now, we heard similar things following the incidents in Kabul in Afghanistan recently. People were promised that they would be welcomed here and given a home. And I'm afraid to say, we've still got Afghan refugees in hotels, not yet being settled, not yet being given access to all the support that they need. There cannot be a repeat of that. We have to sort out the situation for the Afghans. We have to make sure that things are done better for Ukrainians who may wish to come here. Okay. I think as well.
Yeah, Andrew, the government has waived visa application fees for those eligible under the family migration route. Is that enough, though? What more should they be doing?
Well, I think we should open our doors to those refugees, people who are in desperate state at the moment. But, we've got to also get the message through to the Russian people as well. With a state-controlled media, it's very difficult for them, the real messages of what's happening in Ukraine to get through to them. And I think we should start to talk about how we get those messages through. One of the things I'm outraged about is that we're still considering playing football with Russian teams. If there's anything that says everything's, or any other sports, to be honest, if there's anything that says, oh, everything's all right, it's the carrying on of sporting fixtures. We learned that the Munich Olympics back in 1936 did absolutely nothing to dissuade Hitler from his plans for European domination. And we shouldn't be trying to play play sports and normalise relations with those Russian teams. They've got to get the message that the whole West is united against what Russia has done.
The Champions League final in St. Petersburg later on this year has, of course, been cancelled, hasn't it? Let's talk more about sanctions.
There shouldn't be any Russian teams in it. There should be no Russian teams in it at all.
Okay.
The Russian people have got to learn that, and the only way they're going to learn it is if they're suddenly cut out from those fixtures.
Steve, you mentioned sanctions. For years, both Labour and Tory governments have allowed Russian oligarchs to flood into London with their billions of pounds. Is this the moment to finally crack down on Londongrad? Have you heard enough from the government that they're really stamping this out?
Well, the fact that one of the nicknames for London in Russia is the laundrette tells you everything you need to know about how easy it is, how the Russians view the opportunities to launder dirty money through London. And frankly, the government has gone far too soft on this for years. They've been urged by cross-party select committees and the Labour Party in Parliament to take action against oligarchs who are able to shift money into banks and property in the UK, and it is that money that has ultimately been funding. But
now they are taking action. Does it go far enough?
They're not taking anything like enough action. We had the Russia report, didn't we? A cross-party Russia report just a few years ago that the government shelved. We haven't seen yet that they're going to finally belatedly introduce that. We'll wait until Monday until we see what sanctions they are bringing in. But this time we have to genuinely look to ourselves and take Russian dirty money out of politics and business in the UK, and we have to apply sanctions on the Russian economy that will choke it so that Putin and his oligarchs feel the pain of what they've done and are never able to do this again. The security, I believe now, of the free world depends on us matching the rhetoric with action in a way that has not been done for the last decade.
Andrew, is this shameful for the government, this billions of pounds of Russian dirty money swashing around and, as Steve says, being laundered in London?
When you want to put in place sanctions, you've got to make sure that you're hurting the right people. And yes, they have gone very far. We know that there are hundreds now on that list of oligarchs whose money is not welcome in London. But what we've got to do is stay focused on who we're trying to attack here. And unfortunately, the Mayor of London's attack, which is a sort of a general rant against all foreigners, is not helpful. And if anything, it's xenophobic. What we have to do is ensure that we're hurting the people who have got connections with Putin and the Putin regime.
There's one reason why the Russian oligarchs think they can get away with this is because the Conservative Party has accepted donations from Russians who have links to the Kremlin. Now, a start we could make would be for Boris Johnson to pay that money back as part of clearing Russian dirty money out of British politics. Because for as long as the Conservative Party is up to its elbows in that money, we will not clear up our politics, and we will not be able to demonstrate to the Kremlin that we mean what we say.
If you start picking on Russian Londoners who live in Russia, I've got a friend in St. Petersburg, and he was telling me only today, that the Russian, for example, in St. Petersburg, the Russian people themselves don't want anything to do with this war. They want to stop it. If you start focusing on Russians who live in London, who have no rights, then
Gentlemen, we must leave
on the racist, Steve.
Okay, we must leave this discussion here. We'll return to it, though, I'm sure, at a later date. For now, thank you. Now, moving on, and after Cressida Dick's resignation as Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police earlier this month, thoughts have turned to the future of the force. Her replacement faces the daunting task of regaining public trust after a string of officer misconduct scandals and accusations of institutional misogyny and racism. Helen Price spoke to Dr. Ronald Surpass, board chairman of the National Police Federation in the United States and former chief of the New Orleans Police Department. She began by asking him whether the new commissioner should be an outsider.
I think the time comes in every organization that an external candidate who has no connection to the agency but has a sufficient experience base to be able to come in and breathe some new life. And in the times of crisis and scandal, a new external chief has the benefit of not having any existing conditions or relationships with the current employment.
Cressida Dick has been criticised for not having a good understanding of public mood, particularly after Sarah Everard was murdered by a serving Met officer. How important is it for a commissioner to be out in the community speaking to people?
The most important thing you can do for the first 365 days is to be in a community meeting every single day. You have a period of time to introduce yourself to the community directly. And by being in those meetings and being in those events, you have a chance to kind of thwart the way your reputation will be described by the media, described by your employees, described by unions, described by all types of people.
What is the most significant thing that a commissioner can do to create lasting change within a police force?
To make a lasting change in the culture of a police organization or any organization begins with the way you recruit, goes through the way you hire and train, continues through how you discipline, and most important and most crucial, how do you promote the next generation of leaders? Oftentimes, a political process will recognize the need for diversity, crucially important, but it happens in the early hires, and then it's put upon at the very top. And it's in the middle where you have to build the competence for change in diversity, ethnic, gender, education. In police organizations, the only thing that officers sell is their word. And we created policies that terminated officers on the first untruthful statement related to their work. And the logic that we applied to the courts that supported us was, if we cannot trust a police officer to tell us the truth about what time they got to work, how, as I, as a police chief, would be able to trust them on very serious consequential issues if they were willing to lie about something so inconsequential.
Steve, to you first. You're Shadow Secretary of State for Justice. What will you be looking for in a new Met Commissioner?
Well, I mean, I share the concern that most members of the public in London felt when they saw those WhatsApp messages from, I think it was Charing Cross police station, and some of what was being said and done by other officers, some other officers, after the murder of Sarah Everard. There's clearly a problem with the culture in parts of the Metropolitan Police, by no means a majority, but in parts of it. And the key to clearing that organisation up and getting it to focus on the real priorities of a very, very diverse city like London is the quality of leadership. So what I would be looking for, if I was the Home Secretary or indeed the Mayor of London, who will be consulted on this, is very clear leadership and a determination to focus the Metropolitan Police on the needs of a very, very diverse city, to make those expectations clear, to enforce those expectations through appropriate training, and then to get the police focused back on the thing that really matters to Londoners, which is keeping them safe, catching and prosecuting criminals. And that is where the attention of the police force here should be.
And Andrew, do you think, given all of that, this person needs to be an outsider, as Ronald suggested there?
I don't think it's needed. There are plenty of candidates, people who've been chief constables around the UK, who've had very good performance. And so it doesn't need to be an outsider. But one of the things that we've got to be sure about is that it is a commissioner who will uphold the professional standards of the police, because the confidence in the police can only be sustained while those professional standards are upheld. But it's going to require a very special kind of person. The reform of the Met is a long haul. It's not an instantly done. And it's going to be difficult for any commissioner to carry on that reform with a capricious mayor who is not willing to back them when the going gets tough. And so, yeah, we do need somebody who is going to be able to take on the mayor in order to ensure that our police force remains the best in the world.
OK, Steve shaking his head there.
Well, I just think it's ludicrous that every time you ask anything, Andrew tries to turn it onto the Mayor of London. It's actually the Home Secretary that's responsible for it. It's the Home Secretary that's responsible for appointing the Commissioner of Police, and the kind of problems we've seen in the Met, actually, we've seen in police forces in other parts of the country. So I could easily have said, and I will say now, where's the leadership from Priti Patel been on all of this? Now, we're speaking right now about the Met in London. It's important that we get the quality of leadership that is required in the new Commissioner. And I think as well, there's another important point that we had in your clip there about visibility and engagement. I think it is a really important important thing that the Commissioner is out and about in the communities across London, being seen to listen and then respond to what our communities are saying. A very important part of policing in our country is we have policing by consent. And that means the new Commissioner being out and about and engaging with the public so they can see that they're responding to what is actually happening in our communities on the ground.
Andrew, are you concerned that the Home Secretary and the Mayor may clash over who they think is a suitable candidate? And do you think that this is an issue, given that the Home Secretary has the overall say in who's appointed, but the Mayor has day-to-day accountability?
I don't think you can change the rules now, but what you've got to remind people of is that one of the reasons the Met Commissioner's job is so hard is that they've got two bosses. Now, it wasn't Priti Patel that said she lacked confidence in Cressida Dick. It was Sadiq Khan. It was Sadiq Khan who knew about all these problems, for example, at Charing Cross Station many months ago, even at the time when the Cressida Dick was being reaffirmed. The problem is the Mayor's office is chaotic and it is unable to give confidence, attract the confidence of either police officers or even the Commissioner of Police.
Andrew, thank you. Now, London could be set to revamp its road charging system yet again as the capital looks to reach net zero emissions by the end of the decade. Last week marked 9 years since the death of Ella Deborah, who, at 9 years old, became the first person in the UK to have air pollution listed as a cause of death. Jessica Ewer met with her mother, Rosamond, who fears that more children could be affected by London's poor air quality.
You may think London is doing well in its fight against air pollution, but in certain hotspots, there's still a long way to go.
This machine measures the amount of nitrogen dioxide that's in the air. From there, an annual average level can be reached.
The World Health Organization says that reading should be no higher than 10. But in Brixton, that reading is almost 70. One reform that was proposed 7 years ago is emissions-based road charging. It's been called a smarter replacement for the ultra-low emission zone. It could even pay Londoners who use greener transport.
I think it's definitely fairer, and shorter journeys, it will curtail people from jumping in their car. You know, sometimes someone can say, we're putting in a scheme and we will review it in 18 months. Well, in 18 months, you could have a child who didn't have asthma, and by the end of the 18 months, if things haven't got any better, that child could have asthma.
It's been 9 years since Rosamond's daughter Ella died from exposure to air pollution.
And I remember the first inquest, looking over at Ella's doctor when the pathologist was reading the post-mortem, and her lungs looked like she'd been smoking. And there was a second of me just looking at her consultant, because we didn't see that on the x-ray screen when she was alive, and it took a post-mortem.
Sadiq's deputy for transport told us that expansion of their current system was their focus.
Expansion of ULEZ is one of the options that we're looking at as an interim measure, because, as I say, we can't afford to just wait until we have a system in place. We have to take action now.
I asked about emissions-based road charging.
Look, we're getting there, but as I say, we need to have that consultation. We need to have a proper, robust series of discussions with Londoners.
Can you predict possibly when we might be able to see it?
I mean, all I can say is that before the end of the decade, we will, I'm sure, be in a situation of being able to implement it.
The Mayor's team say new clean air policies are coming, and some will be in this mayoral term.
Well, Simon Burkett from Clean Air London joined me now to discuss. Simon, welcome to you. Thanks very much for being with us. So, a new road charging system, how would it work?
Well, at the moment, we have several blunt instruments. We have congestion charging, the ultra-low emission zone and the low emission zone. It's very confusing for people. A new scheme, emission-based road charging, which I've been calling for since 2015, would be one scheme which would be bigger, stronger, smarter and fairer. And all it would have to do is work out where people are, time of day, place, and the quality of fuel that they're burning. The technology has been there for years, And this is something that we need urgently. We need it in 2 or 3 years, which could be done with full consultation, certainly not waiting till the end of the decade. That is just not urgent enough.
So would it be fairer? Would it level the playing field between richer and poorer? Would it cause more problems for people who use vans, for example, for work, increase their costs?
It'd be much fairer, because at the moment, if you trigger any of these zones, congestion charge, ultra low emission zone, if you even go in 100 yards when there's no traffic around, you still pay as much as somebody who's driving in a big dirty vehicle for the whole day. Now, that is just not fair. That is a blunt instrument. This scheme would take account of where people are, when they're there, and the quality and quantity of fuel that they're burning.
OK, Andrew, what's your thoughts on this? City Hall have told us they're strongly interested in the technology, but it isn't quite there yet.
Well, there's nothing fundamentally wrong with road charging as long as it replaces the taxes on commuters in London, on people who use our roads in London. The problem we've got at the moment is we've got a mayor who's insistent that it should fall disproportionately on those least able to pay. For example,
Simon
emergency.
just said that it won't fall on those who are less able to pay. This will be fairer.
That's what we've heard before, but I'm afraid, you know, the person in charge is Sadiq Khan, and he's been unwilling, for example, to make exceptions for emergency service workers who have to get into work before public transport comes in. He's been unwilling to take into account the needs of disabled people who need to use those streets. He's been unwilling to talk to charity, or unwilling to move, despite talking to charities.
Let's put these criticisms to Steve. Are these fair points?
Plenty more.
I'm surprised Andrew hasn't yet blamed Sadiq for the invasion of Ukraine, since blaming Sadiq is the stock response to any question you put to him. On this actual issue. On this actual issue, toxic air is a real problem in London. Your clip there just made that absolutely clear. As to what you do about it, I've always felt with measures to support green approaches, you have to take the public with you. Otherwise, you generate a backlash that means that you can lose the progress you could potentially get. Now, there's a consultation going on at the moment about a range of options. Road pricing is one of those. Extending the ultra low emissions zone is another option. We'll see what the public in London, what Londoners actually want. And I think, we'd be wise and sensible to wait and see what Londoners say before we finally pronounce on this. But it seems to me that a key way to reduce emissions from vehicles is to reduce the number of vehicles on the road. And a key way to do that is to improve the quality and affordability of public transport. Now, because of the pandemic and the fact that Londoners followed the rules and the number of people travelling on public transport dropped by 90%, revenue for Transport for London dropped dramatically. There's now a multi-billion-pound funding black hole in the finances.
Okay.
And if the government continues to refuse to help to deal with that, then public transport in London will be cut as a result.
All right.
And more people will be forced into their cars, creating more toxic emissions.
OK, guys, let's stick with this new possible plan. Simon, is it true that people could be paid to walk? And if so, how would that work?
Well, it would be easy by just working out how much you charge the most polluting vehicles to raise funds from the scheme. The government is saying that they want the mayor to raise between 500 and £1 billion as part of the TfL refinancing. While there are encouraging tones this weekend about how those negotiations are going, you would tune that scheme so
Simon,
that you could pay people.
Apologies for interrupting you. We'll find out plenty more about this. We must leave it there. We're out of time. My thanks to all my guests, to Simon and to Andrew and Stephen. Thanks to you very much for watching. Have a great rest of your day. Goodbye for now.